the red dirt and mud there actually stained my skin. And I thought I was just super tan, but after I got to scrubbing, I revealed that there was a layer of dirt on me that was like no other. And it took the 2 hours of soaking in the pool and scrubbing with a stiff bristled brush to get my skin back to the original color that I was.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wild Dispatch. I'm Robin and I'm back with more skills and stories from the wild. And we've got another stonking great episode today with a fantastic guest. I don't know where to begin, other than to say Cole Wilks is an absolute beast of the wild. He is highly evolved to survive out in the bush. And he has been filling his freezer with wild sourced game with just a bow and arrow since he was a kid. But the great thing is he's also been showing other people how to do this through many different channels, through YouTube, podcasts. He even has online courses. And even now, through an episode of a particularly large-scale survival TV show. Through my chat with Cole and the things I've seen over the years, it's clear that he's a man with both deep thoughts and emotions, and he is not afraid to show them. But he's also not afraid to show the African continent his bare ass, both, I guess, metaphorically and literally. He did this by taking part in the latest season of Naked and Afraid and just absolutely thrived for the full 21 days with his partner, who was also in the show, Shell Armageda. So it was absolutely fantastic to chat about all the small details of that experience. I love going into like the nitty gritty, what people are thinking, why certain things happened the way they did. I just think it's a really nice way of going a little deeper than the originally portrayed experience. But before we jump into this episode, I have to do the obligatory hat in hand moment and just let everyone know that if they are enjoying the podcast, it would be amazing if you could share it with a friend, anyone who you think might find this sort of subject matter interesting, or anyone who maybe needs to be inspired to get out there and start chasing these experiences out in the bush. It would also be amazing if you haven't done it already, then it would be fantastic to just pause for 1 second and quickly go and make sure that you are subscribed or following. I don't know what the exact terminology is on the platform that you're using right now. Or also, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, leave a review. Leave a absolutely glowing 5-star golden. You can write a short story about how amazing your experience was if you like. That would really make my day. I don't have any prizes to offer right now for that kind of behavior, but I will be incredibly grateful. And the algorithm gods will be happy. So, but I will stop at that. I will no longer continue with this long waffle. Let's get on with the episode.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch!
How's it going, Robin? Thanks for having me.
It's going good, man. It's going good. I'm excited to get you on board, dude. I'm glad we managed to make this happen. What have you been up to lately? Have you been up to anything fun, or have you got any fun outdoor adventures coming up on the horizon?
Yeah, I actually just got back from a Naked and Afraid it was a benefit for one of the girls that was on season 7. She was, I guess, diagnosed with PTSD, and she ended up passing away from addiction thing several years back. So there was a benefit for Mel in Louisiana called Surviving the Swamp. So I just got back from that actually yesterday. It was really cool. The Naked and Afraid family is just such good people, and the support out there is so awesome. So it was great to go go do that event and see a bunch of cast members that, I know their faces, but never met them in person. And, it was just super fun time. And then actually this weekend, I'm actually headed up to New Mexico, to Raton, New Mexico, to the Western Hunt Fest. I'm going to be participating up there in the 3D archery challenge, as well as there's a elk pack out challenge. And I might participate in the elk calling champion or the elk calling competition as well, but we'll see.
Um, wow, it sounds like a lot of things. I mean, I'm unsurprised because if anything, in my research about the things that you get up to, there's just so many different things, different like areas of outdoor fun and mischief that you get up to. So, yeah, I
I
say I'm
do.
unsurprised.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I try to keep my schedule pretty packed. If I'm not working, I am definitely out doing something fun. And I can't go without adventure. I can't go very long without adventure. So I'm always up to something crazy. That's for sure.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, you had, like a powerful experience with the Naked and Afraid team earlier this week. And I guess, I mean, that must have been in itself like a whole mixture of emotions, given like the circumstances of the situation, but then also a chance to connect with a bunch of people who've also been through a similar experience. You now yourself are part of the club. Congratulations, by the way, on making it through 21 days of the challenge. I've got like so many questions, and I'll get into a bit more detail with those things later on. But I guess like it must have been hard keeping quiet about it, right? Because I think that it was winter that you shot in, so that must have been quite a while ago, right?
So we actually went and shot this past May.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's just now fixing to come up on a year. So it was, I mean, of course, it's definitely hard to keep your mouth shut because, it was just such an epic adventure. And, there was definitely some people that, are close to me, but not close enough to really know that I kind of had to just keep them in the dark completely. Yeah, there were some people in there in my close group of friends that I couldn't really elaborate why and where I was. Some of them were speculating that I was like a government operative or something, or a government contractor working somewhere overseas. So I had to reassure them that that definitely wasn't the case. But yeah, it was hard, man. And the people that did know, making sure that they kept their mouth shut too, so that I didn't get in trouble.
Oh man.
Because obviously my mom and all of those people know that I went, and they're giddy and excited to tell all their friends as well. So I was more worried about somebody else breaking it than me.
Oh, for sure, dude. And I can imagine there must have been a point where you're like assessing your loved ones and your close relatives. And as with any family, there's some people who are just more reliable than others. And you're like, oh, who am I gonna bother? Am I gonna tell this person? Is that a wise choice?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, fortunately for me, it was only, my wife and daughter and son, and then my parents knew, and then my wife's parents knew, and that's
Okay.
about as far as we took it. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah, that's
anything
sensible.
after that, man, it's hard. It's hard to keep reins on it.
Yeah. Well, I've got a bunch of questions about Naked and Afraid, which I'm excited to get to. But something I always like to do is just I feel like before I really interview someone about specific other things like skills or stories about something like what's just happened for you or has just come out into the world, I should say, it's really nice to like go back and just get a bit of context, hear your story a bit more. So if you just like come with me back to like you as a youngster, I'd love to kind of hear
Man,
like, what the early days were like. As far as I understand, you did actually grow up in a hunting family, is that right?
yeah, yeah. So I grew up on the banks of the Colorado River east of Austin, Texas. I pretty much ran around there almost naked. I pretty much just had shorts on. And yeah, I mean, we primarily pursued and ate wild game, that being anything from um, anything from fish that were in the river to wild hogs, dove, deer. I mean, you name it. If it was on the landscape, and it was, and it was good eating, then we probably harvested it.
It's fair game, literally.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been bow hunting since I was, I think I harvested my first animal, which is actually a fish in the river, probably whenever I was about 8 with a longbow.
Oh, cool.
And then yeah, I've just been, I've been feral ever since I was born, and that's pretty much where I like to stay.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's I've seen so much stuff that you created, and I just watch with admiration and a sprinkle of envy as well. So, no, it's cool. I mean, myself, I didn't grow up. I mean, I grew up a lot in the outdoors, but I didn't quite have the same connection with food and all that kind of stuff that you have. I'm curious, who was teaching you? Was there someone who was like a main teacher when you were young that was kind of sharing the knowledge with you?
Yeah, man, my dad taught me a lot. And then just me being curious of the Native American people here in Central Texas and how they lived, and how they relied on the landscape to provide for them. It always just intrigued me. And it was just, growing up as a kid and seeing like Huckleberry Finn, or even like the Swiss Family Robinson family movie where they built that extravagant house and all that. It just always appealed to me to live out of like a hut or a fort or something like that. And then to be able to use the land to provide for me. So it's always been something that it's just attached to me since I was born, I think. And my dad definitely was there to teach me a bunch of the hunting stuff, but man, a lot of this stuff I just kind of learned by trial and error, and actually being out there and doing these things in the wild. Putting myself in the situations to maybe pretend like we're surviving and stuff when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was just, I ran around with a pocket knife, and, we had lighters and stuff like that readily available. So we were always just pretending like we were on some survival mission or some big float trip, or, so it was almost just daily life for me.
You said that you were inspired by the native peoples that lived in the area where you grew up. You also, I read somewhere, I think on one of your dad kind of also taught you lessons from the native peoples. Could you like give a little bit more information about that? Because I'm so curious. I mean, it's something that I'm also really interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. So whenever I was growing up, so here in Texas, on private property, we're actually allowed to basically go recover those artifacts in some of the locations. If somebody's going to build a house, or there's going to be construction of a road or something like that, a lot of times we would come in, and there's just a lot of landowners that we do know, and we would go in there and recover those artifacts from the native people so that they didn't get destroyed, or so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah.
We have quite a good collection. And from that, my dad would basically teach me the tools that they would have, everything from the matates and the manos, to just the atlatl points to the bird points. I mean, all the stuff in between that they would use in daily life. Yeah, he would basically, by finding these artifacts, you can really see how the way they would take a piece of chert or flint and then break it down and make these these projectile points and blades and stuff that they would use to go out and hunt themselves for their food.
Yeah.
So that's just always been in the back of my mind. To be able to live like that was something else, and depend on those rocks was amazing.
Oh, for sure, dude. Can only imagine that must have been like a direct point, no pun intended, but point of inspiration. Like you're seeing these things and kind of understanding the context of how they're being used. And that must have been a moment where you're like, I've got to try this. I need to be picking up a bow.
Oh yeah.
And doing this.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, like some of these artifacts, the last human being to touch them was the man that made them, or the man or woman that used them. So that just was insane to me, to get an artifact that's been buried underneath several feet of earth because of decades of deposit of debris and stuff like that. And then to pull that out and bring it back to life and show, and give it the respect that's needed, because that was their life, were those rocks. Without those rocks, they would not have made it. And we might not even be here today because of those same rocks in a different part of the world. So that is, I can't help but just give praise to what they did and what they had, and where we are today is unbelievable.
It's a very good point, and I do sometimes feel I'm not one to usually judge other people's opinions. Everyone has their own thoughts and things that are based on their own experiences, and we haven't all obviously had the same experiences because that would be boring. But I do think sometimes when people are very adamantly, I don't want to get into a whole anti-hunting conversation, but if you don't have that connection or understanding that like where we came from is an absolute product of the skills that people had, there has to be at least some respect for the values and things that people like passed on for I don't even know how many thousands of generations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really think about it that way, because none of us would be here if our ancestors were not hunters and gatherers. Period. The end. It doesn't matter who you are or where you came from. If you go back in the delineation of your, of your being and who you came from, somebody back behind you hunted to be able to survive and for you to make it to this modern world. Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
It is. But before we go down that that rabbit hole, I'm still in this, like your journey growing up and learning. From the things I read and heard, predominantly you started off in the kind of conventional idea. Although I've never had the privilege of hunting in Texas, a lot of it is kind of private land hunting to start with. But you did at some point discover public land hunting and the joy of elk. Could you talk about that sort of transition, or when that change kind of happened, or maybe what it was like before and then the realization?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always grown up in Texas. It's difficult here in Texas because the majority of it is all private property. 1% of our public lands in Texas are made up of public land that you can legally go hunt on. So only 1% of the whole entire state of Texas, the biggest state in the union, is public, so that we can just go out and hunt, right? And as a kid growing up, I thought it was like that everywhere. And I think I was 28 or 29. I might have been 29. A friend of mine asked me to if I wanted to go on an elk hunt to Colorado. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, man. But how much does something like that cost? And he was like, well, you simply go to Walmart and buy a tag for $700, and then we walk out into public land and just go hunt. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? Public land? What is that? What are you talking about? Like a state park? And he's like, no, man, national forest, like hundreds of thousands of acres. Like, we're going to put a backpack on and go walk for 6 to 10 miles out into the wilderness and go hunt elk that are just wild and roaming free out in the mountains. And I was like, well, sign me up immediately. We're going to go chase these amazing, awesome animals that I thought would never be in my reach, because, I'm not a rich man. I can't afford some of that stuff. And at the time, two little kids and a wife and all that. So yeah, at that point, when I went on my very first elk hunt, I decided right then and there that I will do that elk hunt for the rest of my life. And I think it was 3 years later, I started going the entire month of September. So I leave here at my house at the end of October, or at the end of August, as soon as my daughter's birthday is over, and I leave, and I don't come back until October 1st. I mean, that's how much I loved it. Yeah, it is.
Do you have any, I mean, those first years, like, or even the first time, does anything spring into your mind as a story of like your first experiences going out into the elk woods and experiencing this public land moment?
I mean, when just having an elk respond to the bugle that I made and then come in within archery range and just screaming bloody murder in our face, it 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 imprinted me like so deep. And there it was just such a, man, it's hard to even describe it or put words to it. I'm not good at articulating my words anyway, but it was just something like deep down inside of me that and I didn't even pull my bow back or anything on that experience. I did shoot an elk that trip, and I've shot an elk every time that I've went, which is extremely difficult. But just that very first reaction of getting that bugle and that animal, responding to me and then us communicating verbally, I was sold. I was sold, and I knew. I mean, I practiced and I dove into elk hunting so deep that I really made it a lifestyle.
Yeah. I can
Yeah.
see your passion. and,
Oh,
and
dude.
it's so clear. And I mean, I've not been lucky enough to get out there after elk yet, but I can imagine I'm going to get that bug pretty quickly as well because
uh,
yeah, this that interaction and calling and the challenge of it just sounds so fascinating and so fun and just it's so raw, like being out there and basically joining in the party of nature, right?
yeah. Yeah. 100%. And it's a funny thing because there's so many guys that really dream about that experience. And then they go out there, and once you've done it, there's two different elk hunters. You're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. There's no in between. Like, you're either going to do it again or you're never going to go back.
I've got a question for you. Every year you take like a month off and you're like committed to chasing these elk. But it also kind of ties in with something else I heard you say. I think it was actually in one of your first episodes that you did of your new podcast, which we'll talk about in a bit. But
Yeah.
you mentioned about there being a point in your life where there are often conventions in
I
society in the way people live their lives where it's like you need to chase the big house and the car and all these things which are like almost like checklists. And you kind of touched on
yeah.
realizing that maybe that wasn't how you wanted to live your life so that you could unlock other things. I'd love to hear about that moment or if there was anything that really informed that moment happening in your life or just talk more about it in general as well.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So to I'll say this. So the day that I die, I hope to have $0 in my bank account. Okay. Because I want all of that money to be spent on having awesome experiences. And I realized this about 10 years ago. My wife and I were looking to buy a house. We were at the time we were renting, and we were spending about $1,400 on rent. So uh, pretty good amount for a little three-bedroom house. And then we decided we were going to buy a house. So we were getting ready to go through all that whole process, and you're looking at emptying a big portion of our savings account so that we can put down on a house, and then committing ourselves to 30 years of $2,500 a month house payments. And I talked to my wife and convinced her that I don't think that was a good idea. I don't care about keeping up with the Joneses. I don't care about having the biggest house. I don't care about having the nicest vehicle. But what I do care about is experiences and seeing the world. So I convinced my wife to move out into the country. We live on 11 acres now, and we paid cash for a mobile home. It's an 80s model mobile home, and that's actually where I'm at right now. And we're debt free, man. We don't have a house payment. We don't have that big mortgage. I don't have any neighbors that I can even see. I can hear a couple of them, but we specifically set our life up and to be able to be completely free and not be house poor And now we go and travel the world. I can afford to work from about January through August. And then from August until January, I'm bow hunting somewhere in the upper 48 or the lower 48. Wherever that might be, I don't know. Because sometimes I just get a random hair and I might end up in Kentucky next weekend. Because I don't really have, like, I work for myself. So, and that's another thing. I got away from making other people money and started making myself and my family money. And now I'm so flexible that I can just tell my customers, and if any of my customers are hearing this, I'm sorry, but I'm booked up for the next 6 weeks. I can't get to you guys until then. And I've never had anybody tell me to not do their project because I'm out a little bit, They don't necessarily need to know that I'm out hunting instead of doing somebody else's project, but it's the honest truth that I can't get to your project until then. And it's worked out to be, it's just, I set it up perfect, man. So I just schedule my jobs around my adventures, and me and my wife, if she can take the time, then we go travel.
This is so good, man. And I can definitely relate because I feel like my wife and I went through a similar experience 7 or 8 years ago, where we lived in a trailer for about 2 years, and kind of it's so nice to hear your reflections on it too, because there's definitely like an aha moment, like where a light bulb just goes off in your head. And I remember we were living in like Santa Monica, paying ridiculous amounts of rent, and then we just left that. And because you can probably hear I'm English, I'm not from around here, but we were kind of in this weird situation where we weren't allowed to leave the country because we were waiting for green cards to come in, and we weren't allowed to work. So we're like, oh shit, we got like 8 months maybe, or 6 to 8 months where we're not allowed to work. It's like enforced unemployment. And we're like, well, what can we do? What can we do right now? Well, we're like, get out of Santa Monica, first of all, and then get out there and experience California and surrounding states. And that was just a moment where I can remember as we were packing up our things in like the cheapest storage unit we could possibly find. I think it was in Joshua Tree. And we're packing all our stuff up and all your possessions, all the things that you value. You put that away, and then you come back a few months later and you're like, I don't even feel connected with this stuff anymore. Like all these other amazing experiences I've had, and the fact that we've got like 2 plates, 2 cups, and a knife and fork each. It's like, what do you really need? What do you really need to be happy? And I think it's those experiences, like you said, and having the freedom to go after them that really changed how we saw the world.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, we love things as human beings. We love things. The more things that we have, you think the more happier you're going to get, but then you get that thing and realize that it didn't fill that void in your life that you were hoping it would, until you go experience an adventure and realize that adventure and the money you put into that adventure it so much surpasses the things that you have. And I taught my wife this because we love to just pack. So we'll pack up a bunch of stuff. Like we'll pack a few clothes. If we're going to go on vacation, this is our vacation. Okay. One suitcase is filled with camping gear and different things. And then I'll carry a soft cooler as a carry-on full of meat and frozen food. And then we'll fly out to like Reno, Nevada. We'll rent a car for 10 days. And then we go and we experience the whole West Coast, and we camp out of our car, and I'll go spearfish, or we'll go hiking, whatever we're going to do. And my wife will pack all these clothes and all this stuff, right? And throughout our 10-day trip, she ends up wearing 2 different outfits. Two out of the 15 that she brought, and you get back home and all those clothes are still folded up and put away. And I was like, you should just throw those away because you don't really need all that stuff, but once you learn that, it's so freeing to understand, like, you don't have to carry all that crap around with you. And those things don't make you who you are, or they don't really make your status any better than anybody else's, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I think I might be in your wife's shoes there, though. I'm a bit of an overpacker at times.
Yeah.
I've got like a every eventuality mentality that I think comes from my dad being in the military at some point. But yeah, it's something I can work on.
A lot of people tend to pack their fears, is what it is. That's exactly what it is.
That's a very good point. No, that's
Yeah.
very wise words, and it's so true for me. It's so true for me. I'm always packing. I'm thinking of every possible thing that could go wrong and having the right kind of prep stuff for it. But it's usually, yeah, usually if anything happens in a group, I'm the one who's got the thing that solves the problem.
Yeah.
But really, I just need to be working on my skills. It seems like instead.
Yeah, maybe it
But
all depends on the situation.
It
Sorry.
does. It does. No, it's okay. I was going to say, but like speaking of skills and stories and content creation within the outdoor world and hunting, Cole, you have like made so much different stuff. It's so interesting to me. As I was digging a little bit deeper before this conversation, I kind of was going through, and I've written a list here because I had to write a list, otherwise I wouldn't possibly remember it all. So the things I've got here is like your Flatlander YouTube channel. You've been like a guest on a bunch of podcasts. You've got your Learn, Hunt, Harvest platform, which is a kind of an education resource for people and also classes. You've been on Hunt Warz, and I think I don't know if the term is right, but you were like a coach, or you were like someone who was guiding people in Hunt Warz. Is that right?
Yep, I was coaching their elk hunters, teaching those guys the all the things elk. So I'm a coach for the Elk Bros Blue Collar Elk Hunting Academy online.
And so on top of that also then is like the TV side of things, where you were like almost on the show alone. I mean, you were like perilously close with that one. And then now Naked and Afraid, which you were the opening episode. So yeah, I mean, hats off to you, man. You're like very, very prolific, I think is the word. You like got your what's the term? Fingers in all the pies, or I don't know if I'm like mixing up my phrases. But the thing I'm curious about is like at what point in that journey, I'm wondering if it was connected with when you decided to start living your life in a different way. At what point did you decide to start creating content, and why?
Okay, so great question, man. And so my time in alone has always been my show. I've loved it since the day that it came out. And I've always been infatuated with putting myself in a situation like that. And what's kept me from doing that is not having that backer, not having that safety net of the crew, the paramedics and all that stuff that these shows have. So I've always wanted to do that. So I actually applied for the first 6 seasons of Alone with no response whatsoever. And then season 7, a month or 2 months before they start their casting, I started emailing them. And I emailed them 3 or 4 times in a row one day and was asking them, like, what's the deal? Why this is so stupid, because I can't even get a response from you guys. And I really want to try to go on this show. Like, what is the process? Because I've been doing it for 6 years. Like, am I just not, like, can you just tell by my email that I'm not somebody you want, or what's the deal? And it's so funny because later that day, they responded back and they're like, hey, we actually are going to start casting in about 3 weeks. Thank you so much for your response. You are actually the #1 applicant for season 7. And we're going to get back to you here in just a couple of weeks. In the meantime, we would love to see you work on filming yourself solo and doing some of these survival type things. And they kind of gave me a little list of stuff that they wanted to see. And I was just like, okay, well, I mean, I think probably the best thing to do is just start a YouTube channel. I started Flatlander, and I was like, the best thing that I could do is just start recording some of my hunts and kind of go from there. So I actually started the Flatlander YouTube channel during the casting process of Alone, in which they invited me up for boot camp. I made it. I heard something that's, you know, like 20,000 applicants or something, and I made it to the top 22. So I go up there and cast, and that's kind of how all of this ball kind of started to roll. So it was just them really just wanting to see self-filmed footage, and I basically gave them the link to my Flatlander channel. And then, you know, the rest is kind of history from there. That's where it all kind of started.
There's a number of ways we could go from there.
Oh,
I guess like let's touch. We got like there's so many things to talk about, and I don't want to run out of time before we get to Naked and Afraid because
yeah.
It's so easy for us to talk about.
I've got all the time. I've got all the time you need, unless you're on a time constraint. Yeah.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm good.
You want to know a funny thing about Alone?
Please.
Is so all 22 people that were there, and I'm pretty sure that this is correct, but and Joel can even back me up because he even said, he was like, we all made like our top 10 list of who we thought were going to make it on the show. And I was on every single person's top 10 lists that I knew of. And same thing with Joel. He's like, I don't understand why the producers didn't choose you. But the funny thing is after Roland won that, and for those that are listening, that was the $1 million season for Alone. So after Roland won that, he called me and told me, he's like, as soon as I got to Canada and you did not get off of the airplane, I knew I won it.
How did that make you feel?
Well, I mean, I think the History Channel screwed me out of $1 million. That's how I think I feel.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to sound cocky, and I'm definitely not, and I don't like ego at all. Okay. But I was just, I was confident in my abilities. And I honestly, when I was at boot camp, I just deep down in my heart, I knew I had it. I just knew I had it, you know? And I honestly feel like I was semi-robbed from that experience.
That must have been then, it must have been a hard thing to get over, I'm guessing, for a while.
Me and several other cast members, we literally cried on the phone together. Like I was upset because I honestly thought, okay, I'm a shoe-in. And once they pick me, like unless I get out by medical or something like that, something that's out of my control, I'm taking it all the way. I even told the producers, I was like, so you're telling me that you're going to take me on one of the most awesome hunting trips in the world and go hunt, and I'll have a tag for every animal in the Arctic, and you're going to pay me $1 million? I seriously asked him that, you know? And I was like, is that really the case here? Because I'm in. Let's go. You don't even need to send me back home.
Oh, that's so good. So you gave me like a very logical reason why you started Flatlander. But it's pretty clear from watching your content that I mean, first of all, you're very good at it, but you also have an element to your nature which is very open and very sharing with information and knowledge. And I know you came from like a world of being taught how to hunt, and also, like you said, having a bunch of opportunities to like teach yourself as well as you grew up.
Yeah.
What I'm curious about is like why your mindset, why you think your mindset is different from a lot of other kind of old school, I'll say, I'm doing inverted commas here, old school hunters, which are often quite closed off, don't want to share information, don't want to share, do you know what I mean? It's like a little bit more of a closed off community at times. Yeah.
Yeah, because man, like I don't think that giving that information away to people is a bad thing, because the majority of people they'll soak that information up, but for them to actually go out there and implement it and get into the woods is very unlikely. So the more people that I can get to do that are not hunters already, the better it's going to be. Like, I'm not trying to target any of my audience. It's probably not, they are there. I do have some hunters that are my audience, but I want to reach out to the people that didn't have my background, that didn't have my family that taught me. They didn't have a dad that hunted. They lived in the city. Maybe they grew up totally away from it. Those are the people that I want to reach out to, because I think they can benefit us, the hunting public as a whole, can benefit so much more than you know, the typical country person or the typical person that hunts that's been taught that way. Bringing in those new minds in the new view that they have of hunting and conservation, I think is just, we've got to get the word out there to everybody. And why are we going to stifle somebody that we're already being attacked from all different angles, from people that dislike hunting for whatever reason. And we need all the help that we can get. And anybody that thinks that it's going to hurt their situation by giving this information out is going to end up being lost. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if we don't start to recruit new people that are outside of our community and bring in new blood and new thoughts and people from these urban areas and these, the cities, we're going to lose. We're going to end up losing long term, and we're going to end up having this God-given right taken away from us because people don't understand what we do and how much we love it and how much we care for every resource that's out there in the wild. So I think it's imperative that we get new blood in this, and that's why my YouTube channel is geared to the people that it is. And I want everybody to be able to have that opportunity. And if you don't give somebody enough tools and they go out there and they have too much failure, then they're not going to pursue it, right? And if I can cut that learning curve for those people and get them some successes and some wins under their belt, then they're going to stick with it a lot longer, right? Rather than giving up on it.
It speaks to my heart, dude, like completely. If anything, I'd say setting up this podcast, I tried to think really hard about what it was that I wanted to achieve with it. And there's always going to be a number of different things that you want to achieve. But one of the things relates entirely to what you're saying, which is just sharing experiences, stories, and knowledge and skills from people who have done so much interesting stuff out in the natural world. I'm just hoping that like people can hear that and tap in. And I understand the irony that we are using a technological platform in itself, but it's kind of just using that as a way of planting a seed in people's minds so that they can become aware of this whole existence. I mean, to be honest, that's been going on long before any of this technology existed, because more and more otherwise there's this like the opposite of evolution, turning back into monkeys looking at screens. So
yeah.
I think it's great. Sounds like we have similar missions. You're obviously much further along on your path than I am, but yeah, our goals seem to align there. So
yeah,
good stuff, man.
Yeah.
So with this mission that you have, this is just a small question, but did you experience any like friction, because you're telling people secrets and I don't know if it's necessarily secrets, but some people might perceive it that way. Did that ever create friction with other hunters or people who are like, hey dude, why are you sharing so much stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you're always gonna, and this is so funny because there's always going to be the haters out there that think that we're ruining certain things or certain areas or ruining the public lands because we're bringing so many people into it and stuff. And you know what I have to say to those people is screw off, man, because you, first of all, none of these animals are yours. And um, yeah, it just, yeah, I don't care anything about the haters. And most of the times, the people that are hating are the guys that have been doing it a long time and are unsuccessful very often. They are the guys that can't go out there and get it done. And it's for whatever reason that is, you know, anybody can sit back and be an armchair quarterback through the internet. And I don't, I don't even now, I don't even engage with any of that because it's just so ridiculous to me that anybody would make that any kind of comment like that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, right? There's obviously something else going on behind the scenes for someone to have so much emotion around a certain subject. I've got I've got a question for you though, which is, and I wonder if there's a specific moment that springs to your mind. But clearly, I mean, you've done a lot of things as I set up, and you've now done this amazing job on Naked and Afraid. Was there a distinct moment where you felt like you've been creating this content, things are going well, you're getting more followers, getting a bit more momentum? Was there a snowball moment for you, a moment where you were like, okay, things are really picking up now?
Man, I think it has to be during, you know, during my challenge there in Africa, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I gave myself a 5-year plan with the YouTube channel because I had already started it, and I don't really like to I'm not somebody that gives up on something very easily. And there's been a giant lag in my content on YouTube because of the show and everything, and filming, and just other things on top of that. But yeah, I think honestly, whenever I was in Africa and some of the things that were said to me by some of my production crew was just, you know, it really blew my mind. Um, because man, I honestly thought that, you know, there's a lot of people that are as good or better than me. You know what I mean? And I didn't think I was anything special until kind of that time, you know, that I was out there in Africa, and the all that my crew was in, you know, just kind of shocked me because I'm like, you guys have been doing this for a long time. And you know, and maybe they blow smoke like that to everybody, but it really made me feel pretty special, and that maybe I did have something that was unique, you know.
I mean, this is a perfect moment to then duck more into detail on Naked and Afraid. I've got like a
Yeah.
lot of questions. But let's talk about that. What was it specifically you were saying that the thing that I'm also being a bow hunter myself and having spent quite a lot of time over in South Africa and learning a lot of hard lessons with the wildlife over there.
Hmm.
What was it like? What aspects of your experience did you find were good or hard or things that was like a steep learning curve? Or what was your general experience trying to like chase animals, like I guess plains game animals in South Africa for, I think the first time, right? The first time you've been there.
Well, that's the first time I've been to South Africa. Yes. But
Okay.
not, but it's not the first time that I've pursued African big game. Okay. So the,
Texas.
the cool thing about living in Texas is I actually used to run and operate an exotic wildlife ranch here in Texas, and so I actually pursued these animals for years before I ever set foot onto Africa. So I knew a lot of these animals, you know, habits and their feed and their group mentality, and you know, so I've been practicing for that for a long time. I would on that ranch and in many other ranches, I would actually go out and trap and tranquilize a lot of these animals. So we would have to get very close within bow range to be able to tranquilize, you know, say like a wildebeest or a scimitar horned oryx, and then we would transport those animals to other places. So the landscape, even to tell you this, in Africa is so much like Texas. It's unbelievable. So I felt like I flew 30 hours to go home. When I arrived in Africa, it was like I was at home. Totally. I mean, it really, the landscape, everything about it was just like the hill country here where I live. Granite gravel, granite outcrops, you know, uh, savanna woodland kind of looking areas. I mean, it was just like I was at home. So it was to me, I felt like I hit the ground running.
Yeah. Was everything super spiky as well in Texas as well? Like is because I
Yes,
know when I'm
yes.
hunting in South Africa, you get scratched by everything.
Yeah, we have a bunch of mesquite and cactus and prickly pear and weesatch bushes and stuff here in Texas. It's the same way in South Africa. Everything stickers on the ground,
Oh yeah.
briar patches, and the acacia trees, which have their thorns on them are 2 inches plus.
It's so big.
Um, they're so big. Yeah, so it was. I think the only thing that I really had a hard time with when I was in Africa was just getting the amount of sleep that I wanted. That was the most
Yeah.
difficult thing, I think. Yeah.
I do. I want to ask you all about the different aspects. And we could jump into that now, I guess. But one thing I was curious about, you talked a little bit about it with Alone, but like how did the opportunity arise to get on the show Naked and Afraid? Is it a case of just going through the application process as usual or
No, actually. So a friend of mine knew a casting director for I don't remember which production company it is that works with Discovery. There's a couple, but anyways, they uh, buddy, it's actually Keith from Alone from season 7. Me and Keith are really good friends,
okay.
also. And so he gave my info to one of the casting folks, and then Neck and Afraid actually reached out to me, and that's kind of how that whole ball kind of started rolling.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
that
and
makes sense then.
when it was all
Did
said
you
and
get much
done,
warning?
I had
Oh,
like a week.
go
I
on.
had like a week and a half,
Wow.
before departure. Yeah,
So they told you a week and a half before you like go time. Wow. So you
yes,
didn't really have any time to like gain weight or do any like of that prep stuff beforehand. I mean, it's a 3 week challenge,
no,
so it's not like a long, long, long period, but still.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was super because it was the time of year it is. It was right around this time of year, and because of that, this is my super busy time of year. So I had to knock out everything that I had planned for work before I went on that, so that I didn't lose any of those opportunities. So I didn't even have time to really research. Well, they didn't even tell you the area until you're about to go there. But I didn't have much time to even research, no time to put on weight. It's the summertime in Texas, so it's 110, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah, there was really no time to do anything but just kind of mentally prepare more than anything.
Just get excited.
Yeah,
What was the area that you were in?
yeah, I was in Limpopo, South Africa. So Limpopo is the province I
Okay.
was I was in there.
Okay, so that's like northeast-ish kind of area
Yes.
of
Yep.
South Africa, I
Yep.
think, right?
Yeah,
Around the
you're
kind of
right.
area or east. Well, that's cool. I mean, I've never been lucky enough to hunt in Limpopo, but I've hunted in the Eastern Cape, which is, I guess, a bit further south than that. But
Hmm.
oh man, yeah, that's so cool that you just no warning, bam, you're just like over there. I mean, and the weirdest thing as well, you're saying about flying 30 hours to get to the other side of the world and it felt exactly the same, but also then your time difference is happening. So it must be super freaky because
Oh,
you're like in the same place, but your body is like, what's going on?
yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a shock to the system, the jet lag and stuff, but you're so amped up whenever you get there. Like it's no wonder that some of these people are just tapping out early because you're amped up from the time you get on the plane, until the time you
Mm,
start. So there's days and days of the buildup of you going into insertion. And that alone is wearing on you, as that time approaches.
oh man. Yeah. It's okay. So you get there and you get like deployed, but you have a hike at the beginning, right? Is that correct? You got to hike into the area.
Yes, yeah, we do.
How how was the water situation with it when you were traveling to your deployment spot? did you have to like get creative with like getting water on the way, or it was okay? You had some hydration at that point, and then you arrive and you got to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, we had to pretty much figure it out ourselves. And luckily, we are provided with a map. So obviously, they're not going to put us in an area where we don't have a water source. But it is up to us to be able to purify that water source and make it drinkable to where it's not going to affect us health wise. So on the hike in, we actually came up on just this little stream, and you can see that in the beginning of the episode. And that little stream actually led to a pretty good sized little pond. And that's actually one of the first things that I worked on, or that I actually got Shell to take over the water duty, and get the fire started. That way I could kind of start on the shelter. That way we could delegate and kind of cover two things at once. Because, the temperatures were like in the 90s during the day. So hydration was the very first thing to work on. And anytime you're in a survival situation, you want to mitigate your risk no matter what it is. So if you think you're going to be attacked by animals, then you want to build a protection shelter. If you think you're going to be rained on or whatnot, then shelter is your most important thing. And where we were, hydration was the most important thing, and then shelter before dark.
So something I thought was really cool that you did in that episode is you made yourself a well, which immediately is going to save you a bunch of time, right? I guess you don't have to do the whole sterilization, boiling process, which is a bit of the time suck.
Yeah.
Is that just like something that you've frequently used in the past, or is that something that you adapted to?
Yeah,
To
that's
implement
something
this,
that I,
this experience?
have just learned over the time of being out in the woods so long and just understanding the filtration process that the earth has. There's no microbes or any of that bad stuff that can pass through the earth with the water. And those techniques of that coyote well like that have been used for thousands of years. If they weren't drinking right from the source, a lot of times the natives, if it was a pretty nasty pool, they would always dig a well off to the side. And they would have those wells stationed throughout their landscape, which I did as well, but it wasn't really shown. But yeah, I've
Yeah.
as a kid, I mean, we used to do it all the time. Just we would take off and go hiking and doing stuff, and if we couldn't find a spring, then that's kind of how we would drink.
That's so cool. So if we can go on a little side tangent here, I guess it's the same thing. It's not a side tangent, but I'd love a bit more info before we like move on to other parts of Naked and Afraid.
Yeah.
So what are the kind of main factors when you're choosing a spot to dig a well? What are you looking for? Like a spring, or what's the evidence that you're kind of looking for? I guess it could vary as well in the environment that you're in.
Yeah, it's definitely going to vary a little bit, but for the most part, I need somewhere that I can get down to that water table. And I don't want to dig a well. If the further I can stay away from the actual water and get that water to seep through the earth to my well, the better. So sometimes I might dig a well a little further away, and I don't get the production out of the well that I like. So I need, it's something that you got to kind of play with. I might have to move a little closer to the water so that I can get the flow that's needed, to be able to produce enough for us to drink. So choosing your well location, sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes you might dig a hole and just not realize you're too far above the water table. So that takes a little bit of playing with sometimes.
Okay, so it's just a case of also just looking at the terrain of the area and finding like a natural low spot in some
Exactly.
capacity. Is that
There was a wash that came into our pond, and that's kind of where I started. And it was all just sand, and then underneath that there was some clay. So I just kind of worked my way towards the water until I got comfortable, with the amount of water that was coming in. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it was. And to be honest with you, I dug 8 wells during that 21 days. Yeah, because our water our water level dropped over 24 inches in 21 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
So did you have to, you find yourself having to just dig deeper and deeper to sort of combat that dropping water level, or you were just having to find naturally lower areas?
No, I would just have to move closer to the water every time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because because I want to try to build my well far enough away to where there's a massive amount of filtration that goes on before the water becomes available. So I don't want to be just within 2 or 3 foot of the water's edge because there's some risk of contamination there. What I want to do is get back away from that edge, 10 or 15 feet. So as the water table, it was probably about every couple days or so I'd have to redig, because the water table
Yeah.
would just kind of disappear, and then we'd end up just having a soup, like a muddy soup, basically.
Oh man. Were you stressed about that fact that that water level was dropping and you thinking, wow, if we like run out of our, oh, I mean, you guess you had the pond right there, so you could have boiled. That was backup. So
Yeah,
I guess you weren't too worried
and
about it. It was just,
and we boiled every night and every morning, just because we enjoyed having tea. So we made
mm,
quite a bit of tea, and yes, and every night we were actually put up in our boma, and we were restricted to that boma until daylight hours, because of the dangers of the animals walking around. We were not allowed to leave the boma and go get water at any point in time during the night. So we had to boil water and keep it in our pot, and then we would just sip out of that throughout the night.
whoa, how much volume is the pot, do you think?
Not very big, maybe 50 or 60 ounces, maybe not even that much, maybe 1 liter, maybe. Yeah, the pot was maybe this
Yeah.
big around by probably four inches deep.
Okay. So like 6 inches across, 7 inches across kind of size.
Yeah, for two of us at the end of the night and the very beginning of the morning, we would be out of water, and we would be waiting for the production to come in so we could get it let out of the boma and go get water.
Oh,
We got pretty proficient with it because, luckily the well was there. So I would go down right before they would lock us up. We would both go down, and we carried. She had one of my arrows, and I obviously carried an arrow with me. And we would use those as straws. You unscrew the tip and then pop the end off, and then we would use that as a
mhm.
straw. And we would go down to the well, and we would gorge ourselves with water, before we got put up in bed. So that way we really didn't have to get into our water ration until probably around 12 or 1 o'clock at night. So after the first 3 days, we learned that little trick, and because, dehydration is a big deal out there for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So you said about hearing animals outside and like you being locked up in the boma for protection. Did you get any footage of what, I mean, we saw some stuff on camera, but did you have any moments where you saw animals outside or you could figure out that there was something big going on?
Man, I couldn't really ever get anything. I think I got a couple of pairs of eyes on camera, at one point, but I don't remember being able to really identify those animals. We had a bush baby that would come into camp, pretty often, almost every other night, which is just this big-eyed squirrel-looking little. It's just the cutest little animal in the world. And apparently they're
Uh,
super rare, but we would have one come visit us almost nightly.
wow.
Um, so the way I positioned our shelter and where I had it set up is the animals, they either had to go around us on this other side because we had kind of a little cliff at our back here. And then the wind was predominantly coming out of the south. So the animals that came around the shelter to the south of us, they would end up smelling us, and then they would spook, and then they would just
Mm,
retreat. So I
mm,
always knew when something came to that end because they would always alert and then run off, which was kind of my plan, so that I kind of directed the animals in front of our shelter, if that makes sense, just for protection reasons. And knowing that as soon as something caught our wind, they were not going to stick around, to find
yes.
out what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super smart, man. You don't want any like sudden surprise interactions happening if something just
Yeah.
doesn't smell you and then walks into you. That's not going to be ideal. So,
No.
talking about being exposed, let's talk about the naked bit. there's got to be some aspects to that which I'm curious about. Like, first of all, like I guess the physical aspects in terms of exposure to sun and cold, and like we talked about all the spiky plants that are there. But then also like the emotional side, like it's you're meeting someone for the first time, and there's a whole film crew around you, like, and you're naked. I mean, what was that like?
I mean, it was definitely awkward, to say the least. I don't know if you had ever, like in high school, if you did any sports, but like the first time you ever got a physical, and you had to pull your
Mm.
drawers down there in front of the doctor and you just feel so weird. Like that's the exact feeling I got being there, just having production and everybody, sitting there watch you get undressed, and not only get undressed, but get undressed several times to make sure they got the shot. So it it was definitely uncomfortable. But that really that lasted up until about the time that Shell and I met. And then there was another person in my situation. And it was really just something that we bonded off of immediately. It wasn't weird. And at that point, it was just like I had a job to do, and my job unfortunately entailed me to be naked. So that's just kind of the way I looked at it. Uh,
I guess you get over it quickly.
it honestly faded. I got over it. Probably maybe the first hour was kind of weird, but then after that it was, I was just like, whatever. There's no getting away from it. There's no gracious way of bending over whenever everything's hanging out. And thinking back, my crew members like, oh, dude, we've seen it all. There's nothing you could possibly do to surprise us. So, you know,
Oh, was the sun an issue? I know it's winter time, but the sun can be pretty fierce in South Africa and Africa in general, right? Like you feel it's just weird. I don't know if it's the same in Texas, but you can feel its like sharpness on your skin. It's different than some other places
oh
I've
yeah.
been.
Yeah, I mean Texas is brutal in the Texas heat. It's nothing for us to get 110, 115 degrees during the summer. So I've been living in that my whole life. So I'm very used to the heat. Um, I'm exposed. I expose myself often. We're always out on the lake or the canoe, the boat. So I had a pretty good tan going. My ass and everything under that area was not. But man, I was real cautious about how I moved through the landscape, and I would move from shadow to shadow. And part of that is me being a hunter and wanting to stay concealed.
Hmm.
And then the other part
Yeah,
of that
yeah.
was just being smart about the exposure. Yeah.
I mean, it's a win-win situation, isn't it? And it's definitely something I've learned hunting in South Africa and everywhere, right? But I definitely learned the hard way many times and got taught by some really good people that if you want to have any chance of not being detected by the incredibly talented animals that are really good at not getting killed out there, then you need to be in the shadow at all time if as absolute best you can. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sleep, I think sleep was like a big issue. It seems like from the show and from some of the other stuff, some of the interviews that I saw. Tell me about what was going on with that. I mean, obviously you didn't have a bed.
Yeah.
So what was the situation?
So here's the deal: is there was so many people that want to armchair quarterback the whole situation, and all I can tell you is strip down butt naked and then pile some straw underneath you and see how that feels on your hips and shoulders and stuff like that after 4 or 5 hours of laying on them. It's a totally different situation when you're clothed and you have that barrier against, the elements and all the stuff that's out there. This is the one thing that I didn't even think about whatsoever, and it just totally caught me by surprise. Um, and part of it was because it did drop down so cold at night that we had to have the fire there for warmth. And the proximity to the fire, you're so close. So you're warm on this side, but after a little bit, it starts to burn and it starts to get hot. But at the same time, the part of you that is not facing the fire is freezing cold. So you either stay facing the fire and get burnt, or you flip over and let the other side endure some of the heat so that the other side can cool down. And you really become a rotisserie chicken throughout the night. So there was a couple nights there that were pretty mild, and we didn't really need the fire as much as some of the other nights. And those nights were great. I got some good sleep, but man, just that rotisserie situation, it is just, it's relentless. I mean, you can't not flip over because you'll literally get blistered if not. And then the other side of you is freezing because it's 45 degrees out, so it's
Oh man.
yeah, it was just. And then during the day, what would happen is we would go get in the shade and get somewhere that was nice, get in the little sand, the little creek or whatever. So the sand was moist and cool and it was nice, perfect area, nice shade. And then the ants or the mosquitoes or the flies would land on you and start crawling. And all through your mind is like, okay, is that something that's going to bite me? Or is it just a fly walking on me? So mentally you can't shut it down long enough to be able to get to sleep without those things bugging you and making it think like, oh, am I going to get stung? Am I fixing to get stung by a bee? Am I about to get bit by an ant? Is it a scorpion? All those things are going through your mind while you're trying to get sleep because you didn't sleep good the night before.
It sounds so hard, man. And I can only imagine having experienced some of that over in South Africa myself, of, you're just trying to take a nap under a tree or something. You're out hunting, when I was hunting in the summer. So it's like, you're getting up at like 3:30, 3 a.m., going to bed at like 9, 10. It's a long, long day. So you need to have some naps in the middle of that at some point. But there were definitely times where you just like, I don't know what it is, if you like slap too many ants and they suddenly let off some pheromone or something, which means that they're like, hey, alert, everyone needs to come here right now. But I had it before where like my buddy is sleeping under a tree, nothing's bothering him. And I moved like 8 times to like all over the place. And you just get immediately swarmed with these insects. So I can only imagine, well, that's wearing clothes, how tickly it must be not having any clothes, man.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. They just, we've got hair all over us, so any little insect or any little thing that gets on you, you feel it, and that's what's so
Oh.
crazy.
So I noticed, and by all means, you don't have to answer this question if it's not something you're comfortable talking about. But I noticed in the show as I was watching, and it was like prolonged periods of, I think I'm guessing, sleep deprivation. I don't know if food was an element of this as well. Not getting enough sleep repeatedly, that's terrible for
Yeah.
mental health in one. Like, what you seem to go through that like kind of struggle. Was it the sleep, or was it the food, or was it a combination of things? What was going on with that time?
No, it was honestly, it was just the sleep. That was the only thing that was really wearing on me was the sleep. Um, sorry. Um, because we got that crocodile on day 3 and we were able to eat that sucker through day 8. And then Shell got a couple of catfish, and it was actually the day that Shell got the catfish, if I remember back right. And it was just at that point, I think it was like day 12, and I hadn't slept for about 8 days. And then it was actually that night that the temperatures kind of were mild, and I was actually able to get like 6 or 7 hours of sleep. And then from that point forward, I actually did pretty good with my sleep. There was actually a couple times that we had something come up to the shelter, and Shell tried to get me awake, and she said it took a good 30 minutes to get me to finally like wake up. She wasn't like trying to shake me or anything like that. It wasn't that type of situation, but it was just, she was kind of spooked and wanted to meet, have somebody there alert with her, and I was definitely not. I was gone. 8 days with no sleep is, once it catches up to you, there's no holding it back.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm sure she must have felt a little bit bad as well at some point, being like, do I really want to wake this guy who's been like effectively going through like torture, an actual legit form of torture for from over a week?
For real.
Let's talk about the food a little bit. You said you had the croc, and um I believe, obviously, the catfish. I also heard you talking about the, I'm make sure I'm pronouncing this right, the marula. I think it's marula. I think
Yep.
is the fruits.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think the show obviously is edited in a way to make people feel like things are harder than they are potentially. I mean, correct me if that's not accurate, but it's from what you're saying, it sounds like you did have food and you were like, you were kind of getting through it.
I'll tell you this. So yeah, as far as the edit goes, we don't have any control in any of that or how we're depicted or any of that stuff. We pretty much sign our rights away for that. Um, but I think they did a great job with the edit. And unfortunately, you can only pack in so much stuff of what we did because our 21 days was so epic and there was so much that we did. There was some of it that wasn't shown, but yeah, man, we had I found basil, I think on the first day or two. So we had wild basil. We had these little things called crossberries. They had a little bit of flesh on them that were kind of sweet. We would make tea with those. We had the marula fruit, which they had already been dropped, but as soon as they drop, the temperature's so arid or the climate's so arid out there, they pretty much dehydrate immediately and preserve themselves. So yeah, so that marula fruit has some flesh on the outside that we would actually kind of rehydrate in the pot and make a tea out of it and then eat some of that flesh. And then on the inside, we could take Michelle's tomahawk and we could crack that shell open and there would be these little bitty, probably peanut size, like miniature peanut size marula nuts that were almost had like a little bit of a hint of coconut flavor to them. So we had them, and then what else was there? I feel like there was another something that I'd gathered. Yeah, I'm not. It's not coming up, but there was
Maybe
definitely
it'll come back to you.
yeah, there was definitely a bunch of that stuff. I mean, we drank tea quite often. Every morning, pretty much, we would basically have a tea, and then I would go out on a hunt until it would get super hot, and then I'd come back. And in that time, Shell would be out foraging and doing her thing and doing little projects and stuff. But yeah, we honestly had little treats like that pretty often.
I haven't had the marula fruit, but like, I don't know if you know that there's like a drink in South Africa, but it's called amrula, which makes it hard for me in my mind to pronounce.
Mm.
But it's using that fruit. So
Oh,
that's where it
okay.
comes from, and it has like a coconutty. I think you're saying like as a hint of coconutty kind of flavor. It's very good. So would recommend anyone
Yeah,
listening if they would fancy trying it.
yeah, it's
An
really good.
alcoholic beverage is it's a little bit like Bailey's, which is I guess an Irish. I think that might be an Irish thing. But anyway, I digress. I I would love to ask you a bit more about like the hunting experience that you had there. And I know you said like I mean, it sounds amazing. It's kind of like a dream situation in terms of like a home away from home of having practice being around a lot of these animals. Do you
Yeah.
think, first of all, like based on that experience, did they behave just the same as the animals over in Texas? Because I'm curious about that. Because often it's like how much of it is a product of environment versus, you know, that kind of thing, like experiences and if animals are pressured or things like that. So I'm just curious, did they behave the same, exactly the same?
Yeah, pretty much exactly the same. Just, I mean, really the same as really any wild animal would, especially that's being pursued by, you know, they. We don't have the big cats and all the predators like Africa does here in Texas. So maybe they're even a little more keyed on, more so than ours are here. I mean, but that being said, like it's hunting and they're wild animals, and even though they're in a high fence ranch here in Texas, it really makes it the difficult level is I think the same because they're just switched on no matter what.
Yeah. Did you have any I don't know, there's always like the element of what the edit has time to show. Any other like close calls and things or any stories you want to share of chasing? I saw that you got close to a warthog at one point,
Yeah.
which are like immensely fun
So
animals to chase after. 'Cause. 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 '
people didn't get to see. I
Yeah.
bet, like, just on birds alone, I probably shot my bow 10 times a day on just birds alone. Um, I hunted the warthog and had opportunities at him 4 different times, and
Oh man.
the same exact warthog. And I mean, there were messed up opportunities on kudu. There was messed up opportunities on wildebeest. There was messed up opportunity on waterbuck. Um, there was another one, I can't remember the name of it, but I screwed it up as well. But I mean, that's hunting.
Yeah,
That is
yeah,
hunting
yeah.
right there. Uh, if you're not failing, then
Oh man.
you're not doing it right.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also nice. It sounds like it was a bit more of an environment rich play, not an environment rich, sorry, a game rich environment. So that's
Yeah,
the one thing that I love about South Africa is that I get like absolutely schooled every day, but you get a lot of stalk opportunities. So you can like, it's a really good way to learn a bunch. It's been
yeah.
my absolute saving grace. So tell me, oh man, like what was it like then? Because it's hard enough trying to get in close on animals over there in South Africa. It's hard enough doing that anyway when you're on your own. But if you've got like a camera person, you've got a PH, I don't know, what was the kind of size of the unit you're trying to get, like make a stalk on
Yeah.
something? What was the size of your unit and how was that working?
I think I was on about 8,000 acres. So
Okay.
I would actually traverse somewhere between 3 and 5 miles a day. Just kind
Okay.
of covering different areas of my area, covering different places in my area, I guess. And a lot of that would dictate on which way the wind was blowing that day. So I would devise
Mhm.
plans to go into different parts of my area, depending on the wind and depending on the time of day as well. And we were in the
Yeah.
dry season, so I did have a few little ponds, little water holes that were located that were still holding water that I would frequent. So I kind of had a loop that I would go do
Yes.
every
Okay.
day, and then I would concentrate on other areas that maybe I couldn't get into because the wind was bad the other 2 days. So then once the wind was good, I would go into those areas. So it was a very large area. It was
Yeah.
not there was no way that I was going to cover all that in the three
No, no,
weeks
no.
that we were there.
So I'm also curious, the I mean, I know in South Africa there are rules about like having a PH with you when you're hunting plains game animals and things like that. Like, but you're in a set area where, I don't know how it worked. Like, it's also, I think that's also a thing that I was kind of alluding to with the last question is it's difficult to hunt when you have other people around you. Like, the more people, the more there are, the more things to be seen, right? Like, did you find that made it much harder?
For sure. I mean, it adds a whole new aspect um, to the whole puzzle, and a lot of people don't understand that. They really think that you're just out there, just creeping through the woods solo, and I'm not allowed to divulge like what all was going on behind me, but yeah, it definitely makes it difficult, and people should think about that because we are making TV, so to make TV, you have to have the crew there to be able to document it, so always keep that in mind.
Yeah. And then you also, I don't know, you probably can't share this. It sounds like, but it's also dependent on the team around you, their level of experience around animals. Because, I mean, I'd say even if you have a PH difference between a PH who is a bow hunter versus a PH who is a rifle hunter, that's going to make a huge difference to how close you can get to animals, like that level of awareness, right?
Well, so these guys are professional hunters. It is like you have to go through college to be able to get that position. Okay. They are
Yeah.
required to have hunted all of the big five dangerous game. And these guys are extremely knowledgeable. Okay. And the pH was never a hindrance, to be honest with you. you know.
Sweet.
And to be honest, none of my crew was, because they were very, very, I guess they were very respectful of the way I wanted to do things, and we communicated very well with each other. And if there was a situation or something where I wanted to put a stalk on, then it was pretty easy to get them to kind of do what I wanted them to do to increase my odds for the situation and still be able to get it on camera. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, everyone's got the same goal.
Yeah. And the cool thing is they're recording all this so they can hear everything that's going on. So if I'm 100 yards in front of them and I whispered and I was like, stop, they could hear that.
That's perfect.
So that makes a big difference. Yeah.
If anything, that's actually more convenient than often the situation happens if you're with someone else and you really want them to stop. You can't do any big hand gestures, you can't make any noise. So, oh, yeah, I've been in that situation too many times. So having a little mic would be super handy, man.
Oh yeah. It's definitely helpful.
So I'd love to hear about the eland. It's a cow eland, right? I want to
Yeah.
hear like the whole story. I want to hear how that whole hunt went down, what kind of day it was. I want to know, just tell me everything, because those kind of moments when everything works out, they're such special moments.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I've been getting my ass kicked by that warthog. So I wanted to kind of change it up, and I wanted to go into a new area that I hadn't really disturbed. So that day I pretty much determined that I was going to make a pretty big push and really put on a big hunt. It was overcast, so it lent itself for me to be able to move throughout the terrain and not get burnt that day. So I pretty much spent the whole day out hunting and just still hunting through and keeping the wind in my face and just observing and listening and moving through the bush. Um, excuse me. And it was probably about an hour before dark that that I ended up cutting some tracks and some fresh eland sign. And whenever I say sign, that's fresh droppings from the eland. So I knew that I was in a really good location. And so they have these birds also that are called oxpeckers, and these
Oxpeckers, yeah.
yeah, the oxpeckers actually follow the wildlife around, and they are actually little lookouts, as well as they will give away the locations of these animals, and they make a specific sound. So the oxpeckers were actually the ones that led me to the eland, and kind of gave away their location. And yeah, I was able to basically get the wind in my favor. And what's really cool is whenever the eland walk, so their toes actually overlap each other and they click. So when you get within, I would say 100 yards of an eland, you can actually hear them walking whenever they're moving around. So it was a dead giveaway. And yeah, man, I stalked up into what I thought was what I thought was 30 yards, and I executed my shot. She was actually at about 35 yards, so my shot was a little bit low, and the trajectory of the arrow was it's on its downhill trajectory there at the end of the whatever you call it, the arch of the arrow flight, basically. And I
Yeah.
ended up hitting her low and ended up breaking her offside shoulder. And it wasn't the best shot, but luckily I was able to get enough penetration to where it basically just clipped her heart and then broke that offside leg. And I don't know if you've ever killed any big game, but anytime something has just a nick in it, the heart, the lung, if you only get one lung, these animals can live for an extraordinary long time. It takes them a long time because they have so much blood in their system. It takes a long time for them to expire. And luckily for me, I did hit a good artery, and she was bleeding. She was bleeding pretty good, but being in Africa, when the sun went down, I I have to leave. It's not my choice. It's the safety of the crew, the safety of me. Just everything about it is very dangerous. And I felt good about the shot, and I knew that she was gonna die, but I didn't know if we were gonna be able to recover. Because we're talking, there's hyena, there's baboon, there's jackal, there's lions, like all that is legit there with me.
Yeah.
And so I had to back out until the next day. And then
That's got to be
that night
that's got to
was
be
ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah. That night was just, there was no sleep that night. It was just sitting there contemplating, how bad I'd screwed up and if it was all going to come to fruition or not. But the weight was
night.
Yeah, it was, man. And really I was pretty hard on myself because I hate doing that. But in that situation, in that kind of equipment, using primitive archery equipment like that, anything can happen once you release that arrow, it's out of your control. And it's my job to try to do the best I can ethically and try to put that animal down as quick and humanely as possible. And unfortunately, that's just life. It doesn't always go that way.
I also think that the animals have such crazy reactions over there. It actually looked like in the footage that, and this might be wrong, but it looked like that eland jumped the string a bit when the
she
shot
did.
went off.
That's another thing that why the shot was like it was, is because the reaction time of her, by the time my arrow got there was already movement away from where my arrow would have originally landed had she stayed still. But that is bow hunting, and they do have some extreme reaction times. Yeah.
And the guys in South Africa sort of know or do aim very low because of that reason. And I mean, in the US as well, I mean, with whitetails and other animals. But the same thing actually happened to me with a kudu bull that I shot, I don't know, a couple of months ago. That the speed at which these animals, and these things, I mean, I think it's around 600 pounds, your eland. Mine was also about 600 pounds. How much did yours weigh?
They guessed her about 900.
Okay, but the thing is, it's like a 900-pound animal can like move that fast is mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah, it's insane.
It's crazy.
She was bigger than any bull elk I've ever harvested, body wise.
And the crazy thing is, those elands, like the really, really big males, can get up to like 2,000 pounds, right? The absolute monsters with the giant floppy necks and all that stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, as I was saying before, like I can definitely relate, man, because I also had to have that long sleepless night too, having shot at a kudu bull. I think it was about 37 yards I managed to get in on it. But my technology, I had a compound bow, the arrow is probably traveling 270 feet per second, and it's like a 600 grain arrow. So that was on my side, and it smashed through the shot. Like the thing dropped and moved like 10, 12 inches, like off of where it's insane. Like I have a video footage, which I haven't put out yet, but I will at some point. But like the amount that it moves and turns, it's just bonkers, right? So,
it's mind blowing.
Yeah. So that sleepless night, did you go through an arc of emotion, like as you were waiting? Because I've gone through this before, where you take time, you have like the first emotion and you're like panicked, or you think, oh, I fucked this up. Why did you do that? Did you go through everything in your mind? Did you feel confident or not? By the time morning came, did you sort of, how were you feeling before looking for the animal in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, there's always that doubt that creeps in, did I do the right thing? And, you get real hard on yourself. But Robin, I've been doing this for so long that this happens to us quite often. Throughout my 30 years of bow hunting, there's a handful of times that this has gone down, and I know just to stick to the process and to do everything in my power to make a ethical recovery, and anything outside of what I can do is out of my control. And I try not to worry about it any longer, because unfortunately I did do harm to that animal, and it was, regardless if I recovered her or not, it was going to cost her her life. So that's something that weighs on you. And if it doesn't, then you shouldn't be hunting. If you don't love and care for that animal as much as possible and really put forth that effort and do everything you can to make it as seamless and as quick as possible, anything outside of that is out of your control, and don't beat yourself up about it. That's kind of the way that I went through that night. Is, yeah, I didn't sleep, but at the same time I stayed confident and just told myself that it was going to be okay. And regardless if I was feeding me or Shell, other animals were going to benefit off of that eeling's life, regardless if it was a predator or if it was, baboons or hyenas. They've all got to eat too. Their life isn't any different than that eeling's life, so if I fed them or if I fed us, the cool thing is out there, nothing goes to waste. So I wasn't too hard on myself about it.
It's the reality of nature, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's also, I think it's something which maybe I've only been hunting for 5-ish years, and maybe I'll like get more experienced and more practiced in that sort of duality of obviously wanting to take the most ethical possible shot, but also accepting that in bow hunting there are a lot of factors that are both in your control but also out of your control. So you never quite know. I mean, obviously you can make choices to try and manage or minimize that risk, but ultimately things go wrong, and it's the nature of nature, I guess I should say.
Yeah, it sure is.
So I've got a question, and this is a small thing. In that long night that you were thinking about stuff, because you're tossing and turning as usual, did it ever pop into your mind, Joel Vanderloon, when he did an interview on this podcast? I think it was episode 4, as I said before. So if you haven't heard it, listeners, then go back. It's a really good one.
Yeah.
He got close to taking a moose, and he actually took a shot on a moose in alone, which would have been a game. I mean, that's like $1 million situation right there. Did you think about his situation that night?
Man, I didn't, just because I was just so locked in. But Joel and I have had this experience together as well on a bull in Idaho that he actually ended up hitting in the shoulder. So it's, I did think about that occasion, because having to go through that with Joel, and then to walk up and find the arrow and to just find out that it's a mere flesh wound, was devastating. But that's always in the back of my mind, even whenever I think or I know that I made an absolute flawless shot and I know it's a double lung. I'm always in the back of my mind thinking the worst. I think that's just human nature for us to, expect the worst all the time. Especially in those situations where it's just out of your control after you hit that release.
Oh, absolutely. And it's part of the whole experience as well, right? Like it's part of what makes it so intense. So
yes,
what was it like then that morning? You found a track, you found the blood, you found, like, how quickly did you find the animal? Did it take a while had it traveled far?
Yeah, she traveled a long ways. I ended up getting, we had blood there at the first, where I found the arrow and everything, and that blood continued on until we found her. But have you been on several blood trails? I mean, it's a
quite a few now.
It's a painstaking process to move 100 yards. Sometimes it may take you 30 or 45 minutes, so this was an all day process. We didn't find her until later that afternoon, after lunch sometime, I would say. I didn't have a watch or anything, so I don't know exactly, but I know it was in the afternoon. So she had been, and what's crazy is she hadn't been there long. Like, she had laid down and probably expired a couple of hours before we found her. which was
Wow.
good. Yeah. So
Mm.
luckily none of the predators had gotten to her. So
Okay.
yeah, that morning whenever we went out, we didn't find her until that afternoon. She had only expired, hours before, I would guess. Just judging on the way she had bloated and everything, she was still very fresh. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm actually glad that it happened like it did, because if I would have went after her the day before when I shot her, more than likely we would have come upon her when she was still alive, and I would have ended up bumping her, and I would have lost her totally. Because a lot of times when you bump animals that are wounded like that, they get a flush of adrenaline, and that adrenaline could take them miles and miles. I've had this happen with elk before. So it was really kind of meant to be. We was able to be patient, and luckily she expired and didn't go any further than she did, because we kind of left her and let her be, and just let her expire by herself. So it worked out.
It's a crazy story.
It
I
is
love
crazy.
yeah, I mean that tracking process is, like you said, it's so it takes such focus, doesn't it? You're following trails, and it's like the highs and lows of that moment alone
So
are just so.
to finish that off, I've glossed over this part. So when we were
Mm.
on the trail, I was actually starting to lose blood. And then uh, I ended up noticing the vultures spiraling in the air, probably a quarter mile in front of us. And at that point, I knew where the blood trail was, so I knew I could come back to it. But at that point, it was getting to be the hot part of the day, and I actually just beat feet and started moving directly towards where the vultures were, and that's actually how we ended up locating her, was the vultures.
And that's cool. That's using the experience and knowledge, right? Like the info is out there. It's just understanding how to read it. And yes, it's interesting. I just did a really good interview with a couple of master trackers in South Africa. Guys called Radius and Alex, and that's exactly what they described as being a very effective tracker. You need to be able to be hyper focused on all of the detail, but then also look at the big picture and see what the whole story is telling you. And that seems like that's
Yes.
exactly the same moment with you. It must have been a great moment. You see those vultures spiraling, and you're like, okay, we're onto something here. So wow, that must have been so cool.
Yeah.
And
Oh, dude, I learned a lot of that when from elk hunting. The birds are usually the first things to find any of the animals. So as soon as I saw that, I was just like, okay, she's there. And then my heart rate, of course, increased, and I start getting, kind of pumped up. But then when we came around the corner and I saw her laying there, yeah, the flood of emotions was just overwhelming. I mean, I'm a pretty emotional guy anyway. I've I tend to I get emotional almost every time that I harvest an animal. Um, and a lot of times it's not because of the death, it's because of the adventure and the trials and tribulations that led up to that. It's the whole journey of just sticking with that process, and just how everything seems to really manifest, whenever you're doing the things that you love to do. Um, and hunting like that is one of those never give up situations. I always tell everybody on my YouTube channel, don't ever give up. As soon as you give up, like, that's the end of it. There's no going back to it. You once you give up, it's like you're going to be disappointed. And as soon as you climb in the truck to go home from an elk hunt and you've given up and you still have 3 days left to hunt or something, as soon as you get in the truck and you're an hour away, you're just gonna be like, I got to turn around and go back, you know. So
yeah,
I've just learned to just stick with it, don't give up, and just keep your head in the game, and just follow the process. And you know, sometimes I like to have luck more than I do like to be good. You know what I mean? It's better to have luck than it is to be good, I think. And you
Oh,
know, that afternoon, I just think we were lucky, you know.
oh, yeah, but you put the work in, right? Chasing warthog around and all the other animals. So I think it's something's going to have to pay off at some point. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
how did the meat taste? You've been like limiting your calories for a very long time. I don't, what day was it, but how good was the
Day
meat, man? It
14.
must have
Yeah.
been.
Day 14 was
Okay.
amazing. So we ate her from day 14 through day 21. We actually had hundreds of pounds of meat. Um, you know, we carried out bags of jerky. The meat was fantastic. I mean, just super clean and a very mild tasting meat. If I was to compare it to anything, I would, if anybody's ever had like axis deer, it's real similar to axis deer. Um, all those antelopes seem to taste real similar. I've had just about all of the African and Indian antelope. Um, so it was great. I mean, I loved it. I preferred the heart and liver over the actual meat itself. I mean, I think that was just
Hmm.
because the deficiencies that I was in. But the
Yeah.
heart, the heart and the liver dehydrated was like it's hard to describe it. It had the flavor of a little bit of like a metallic butter. It's real weird to describe, but it was very good, and it was almost like, you know, whenever you, I don't know if you like chips and salsa, but you get some of that like chips and salsa where it's on the hot side, but you can't get away from it. I feel like we just
Yeah.
sat there and gorged on jerky and heart and liver meat for, you know, those next 2 days. I couldn't get enough of it. But I will tell you
Okay.
this, the crocodile was much better than the eland.
Really?
Yes, the crocodile had way more fat on it, and the flavor of the crocodile had like a hint of rosemary or something about it. It was delicious. Honestly,
That's
I
so
pursued
interesting.
I pursued the crocodile more than I did any other animal out there because it was such good eating.
It's so interesting you say that because there is a thing in South Africa, and I want it might be related or not, but um, sheep. I don't know if while you were over there you had any of the lamb, but
Oh
there's Karoo
yes,
lamb. Karoo is, and it has that very herbaceous flavor as well. And they're just feeding on like it's like sage brushy kind of very herbaceous plants there, and it's like they're
yeah.
just eating marinade the whole time. And I don't, I mean, I guess the croc isn't eating the same thing exactly, but there's got to be something in the environment that's giving them that really
Yeah,
herby flavor, right?
we were guessing that maybe it was the smoke that did it, because we used
Oh,
a bunch of Mapani wood, but I
okay.
don't. But the eland didn't come across with any of that flavor, you know. So that's what
So
baffled me.
interesting.
Yeah, because you would think
Yeah.
if it was the wood or the smoke that they would both have that. It the crocodile by far was superb. I mean, it was a delicacy.
Okay, so I've got a question for you. You mentioned in one of your previous chats, I think it was actually a chat you did on your Flatlander YouTube thing when you did a Q&A with Shell.
Hmm.
And I think you said about that you were being very selective at times about what you were going to eat because you weren't necessarily taking shots on all animals. You were letting some go, even though there might be opportunities. Was it, I'm like curious about your thinking of that. Was it like the fact that it was a 21-day limit, rather than like you're trying to last as long as you possibly can, longer than other people, like other competitions? Like, what was your kind of thinking behind that?
To me, I have certain ethics. You know, whenever I'm looking for animals to harvest, I'm not going to take a life that is only going to last me a few hours. Okay. So I'm not going to kill this little bitty lizard or this little bitty turtle or a terrapin. You know, I had the opportunity to harvest all of that multiple times a day. I had snakes I could have harvested, but to me, if I'm going to take a life, I want that life to take my life as far as I can off of that resource that I just took, right? So to me, it's almost like a karma thing, right? If I think that Mother Nature is going to give you that large harvest once you've put in the work she requires to take that animal. Okay. Smaller animals and smaller sacrifices are always presented throughout a situation, but you don't always have to capitalize on that. And when that karmic energy is understood, and this is just, maybe it's some hippie woo woo that I think, but I honestly believe this, that if I spare these other lives, and if I've spared these 5 or 6 lives throughout this 21-day period, then maybe she'll let me harvest one life that'll take me through the span that 8 lives would have taken me if I would have taken those smaller animals. Does that make sense?
That makes absolute sense.
I don't want to go out there and kill 8 animals whenever I can go kill one. Okay. Like, and I don't, maybe I wasn't in a bad enough situation that maybe I would have, but I just firmly believe in that karma of sparing a life to then be presented a much greater feast and only, and that's another thing that I don't like to do, is I don't like to kill animals that are young or that are immature. I want a mature animal that's possibly going to get attacked by a lion soon, or something that's going to die of starvation soon, that is going to die a horrible death anyway. Those are the animals that I like to go pursue. I want the animal that's been on the landscape for a long time, so that I'm not taking some of the other animals that could possibly be in their prime that I know are going to survive, rather than taking this old eland cow that was, I mean, that eland, I'm guessing she was probably 8 or more years old, versus killing a turtle that might have only been a year old. You know what I mean? So and it's just situational, but I'm not going to go out there and just wreak havoc on the landscape and eat this tiny animal that's only going to give me sustenance for hours. I want something that's going to give me sustenance for days, is the way I look at it.
It's such a aware perspective to have, and also I think a brave way of thinking about things, because I can see how if you're in like a survival situation, or at least it's a survival situation on a Naked and Afraid, to still have the bravery to be like, I'm going to make my choices wisely here because I've got values that I'm going to kind of stick to. Yeah, I mean, hats off to you, man. That's it's great. It's a great way of keeping like a perspective on the natural world. And I think having that kind of viewpoint is also, surely if more people had it, that would help preserve the resource that we have better, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's there's no reason to go out there and rape and pillage the whole landscape just because you're uncomfortable for a little bit. The uncomfortable moments are going to come and go, and it's how you deal with them, and understanding that minuscule life that you just took is just, honestly, by the time you get through with it, you're getting them as much protein as a cracker. Like, you might as well not have, you should have spared that life for the protein of a cracker. It just doesn't add up to me, on some of those animals. Yeah.
It makes absolute sense. Well, I've got just a couple more questions, but thank you for sharing that big section about Naked and Afraid. It was really good to hear like your whole experience. So thank you for sharing that. One thing I'm curious about, like, what was it like coming back, and was there like a bit of a readjustment period, eating foods and wearing clothes, and the first shower? What was that like?
Yeah. So, yeah, man, it was actually kind of surreal. Whenever I got out, I didn't put shoes on, I think, until I got back to Texas. I actually stayed barefooted all the way through all the airplane rides and all that back home. So I'm sure there were some people.
Nice.
I apologize on the way back from South Africa to London to America. There was definitely some looks that I got that were probably strange. The first shower was actually, it wasn't even a shower. I was staying in the ranch manager's house, and I spent 2 hours in the swimming pool, drinking beer and just scrubbing the 21 days of dirt and grime off of me. And it took probably 2 showers after that to actually feel like I was somewhat clean. It was crazy because the red dirt and mud there actually stained my skin. And I thought I was just super tan, but after I got to scrubbing, I revealed that there was a layer of dirt on me that was like no other. And it took the 2 hours of soaking in the pool and scrubbing with a stiff bristled brush to get my skin back to the original color that I was.
That's so
And
funny.
then, so my first meal, I requested a ribeye, some potatoes, a cobbler, some ice cream, and plenty of beer. Um, and then, yeah, I think that was it. And they ended up giving me a big tomahawk steak, which was awesome. I mean, that steak was, it was probably a good 3.5 inches thick, the size of
Cool.
my head, so it was awesome. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant, man. I love it. So, from that whole experience that you had, what do you think were the most useful bits of survival knowledge that you used out there? Like, if you could pick like one or two things, what were the things that you're like, okay? And I'm sure it's like a whole overall experience thing, the understanding how to operate in the environment. But if there was something that you'd say is like, this is the things that were like really key for me, what would you say?
So I think the things that really stand me apart from all the rest is my hunting experience. I firmly believe that to be a true survivor and to really survive and thrive, you are not going to get there unless you can acquire food. And the only sustainable way to survive and live long term in the wild is to procure meat. And without that, you will not make it. And the majority of these people on these shows are just on a slow, basically a slow decline and a slow starvation. And I really think that that set me apart from a lot of the people that participate on these shows. To be able to go out there and make a harvest on day 3. I mean, we ate more days than we didn't. The handful of days that we didn't eat were very few, and even then, I mean, there were little snacks in there that we acquired from the landscape. But yeah, it's definitely the hunting. That's what really takes you from being somebody that's just waiting to be rescued to somebody that is thriving out there.
So cool. And you definitely did, man. That was, I mean, there's always like an element of editing and things, so you never quite know exactly the story, but you guys look like you were having a good time out there, apart from the sleep situation.
Dude, I honestly had a blast. I told myself that up until the point that I stopped having fun, I was, going to go up until that point, and I never stopped having fun. Even the last night, I think I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning and I thought it was about 4 o'clock. And I was just screaming at the top of my lungs with excitement, because I had made it to day 21 and I felt amazing. Honestly,
Yeah.
I was really ready. I firmly believe in that location. I could have went 120 days easy. Yeah.
Mm,
And that's one
that's
of
so
my
cool, man.
goals. Yeah, that's one of my goals. Roland, if you listen to this shit, I'm coming for your record of 100 days. Or it probably won't be in the Arctic because of whatever reasons, but some way, somehow, I am going to do a 101-day challenge just to say I did more than Roland.
Nice. Well, Roland, the glove is thrown down.
Yeah.
I'll have to get him back on to see what he thinks about that at some point.
Yeah, I actually
So,
he's invited me up to do a moose hunt with him, so I'm hoping to take advantage of that here soon.
oh man, that'll be sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got one little area that I want to just ask about because this is like a new part of your adventure.
Okay.
Your new podcast, In the Bush with Joel and Cole, and I've listened to I think almost all of the first episodes. There's like maybe 5 out now, I think.
Okay, good.
Fantastic stuff, dude. It's really good.
Yeah, I want to know your opinion.
No, it's really good. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. It's good stuff, dude. And you've got such a good dynamic. You're clearly really good friends, and yeah, it's just so great. You've got access to some amazing guests already. So good stuff. Anyone listening, by all means, check it out.
Yeah, and I think it works pretty good because I'm the dumb guy and Joel's the very smart guy. He can articulate very well. So just to let you know, I made it to the 8th grade and I decided that was the end of my career for school. So as you can tell, my vocabulary is very limited. I like to throw in some swear words in there because, that's just who I am. And that's the limited vocabulary that I have. But we have a great dynamic and it's really been a lot of fun with the podcast. And yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes from here.
Oh yeah, it's exciting stuff, dude. It's exciting stuff. So there is one thing I wanted to ask you about that because you gave a little tease about this I think it was in your first episode. The actual way in which the concept of this podcast came about, which I believe was during a mushroom-induced moment with both yourself and Joel.
Yeah.
Tell me that story, man. I want to know where you were and what was going on.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in psilocybin. I guess I've been probably actively using psilocybin for close to, I would say 10 years, maybe more than that. I had I took a heroic dose way back when. And it really opened my eyes to the world and why we are here as human beings. And it's just to I don't want to cliffhang that, but what came out of that experience is what I learned, why we are all here. And this is just me, in my opinion, and what came from this experience. But God told me the whole meaning to life is love. Okay. That's what every one of us, the ultimate pursuit is to be loved by all. Okay. And once everyone understands that throughout this entire world, that is when the Armageddon will come about. Okay. That's my belief. And I have to be reminded of that because our human traits are to lash out and maybe not be the loving kind as much as we should. So I try to repartake in psilocybin as often as I can. And whenever I go hunting, I microdose very often. Really, I microdose every time that I'm hunting. It just grounds you. It really just brings everything into the moment and makes you live in the now. And yeah, Joel and I sat together this past summer whenever I got back from Africa, and I took a semi-heroic dose of 4 grams, and we spent the whole night just conversating and staring up at the stars. And by the end of the night, we had come to this profound just message that Joel and I, to spread the word throughout humanity, the best way to reach everyone worldwide is through a podcast. And so that's where this whole idea has kind of sprung from. So we do talk a lot about, in the bush, of course, we have that name. It's tongue in cheek. We wanted it to be kind of funny, but it's also where we love to be. It's where everything stems from as far as nature and everything, so the podcast name just popped up the day after actually our ceremony. And yeah, man, I immediately came home and bought all of this equipment and just started gearing up from it after July of this year. And we want to show everybody that we are all the same in one way or another. Like, we really are all the same. And going through life as individuals and human beings and moms and dads and brothers and sisters is so difficult. And just to let everybody know out there that you're not alone, and there are avenues and places for you to go if you're struggling in life. And there are podcasts like this, and just, we are here for everybody, and we want to spread that word, man, about the natural world and the benefits of it for everybody. So that's our goal, is to just spread that message of the natural world and love, to be honest.
It's such a great story, and it's such a great message as well, man. So I love it. I love the sort of mycological intervention, or divine intervention, I should say, the kind of how they're combined in that moment. But that's such a great moment.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that
Go ahead.
that you want to tease, or give like upcoming guests, or anyone that you're excited about, or your experience like this early stages of the podcast?
Yeah. I mean, we have a gauntlet of guests prepared to come on the show. I don't want to give too many of them away, but the most recent
Okay.
one that's going to be coming out is Matt Graham. So I don't know. I'm sure everybody probably knows Matt Graham if you're into the survival side of the world. He's going to be the next guest that we're gonna air. Joel and I are going to finish up our shelters podcast series, which is just a little 2-part series. So that's coming
Yeah.
up. We're going to talk about long-term shelters and what to do and how to keep yourself dry and in a good position there with your whatever shelter you decide to build. But yeah, man, everything from biologists to other alone and naked and afraid survivalists are scheduled to be coming on. And even some people that are not famous and that nobody probably has ever even heard of. And it's just because of the relationships that we have with them. And we think that their life experience and their introspective kind of outlook on life is just, we want to share that stuff with the world, and just, bring on people that are going to make other people better people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. So true, dude. And I completely agree with you. I feel the same. We won't fall too much into like a podcasting bro off, but it's so nice to have like that mix of guests, people who are like high profile people like yourself, and then also the absolute like diamonds that no one's ever heard of. There's people I've met, who I've interviewed, who don't even have mobile phones, right? And so the things that they share, and the knowledge they have, they're just it's so great. Like I love both like well known and kind of the unknown people. If they've got something amazing to share, knowledge wise or stories, then it's all fantastic. Well, thank you again, Cole.
Yep.
And it's been amazing. It's been amazing. Thank you for sharing so much time with me today. Like we
Yeah.
really rolled up our sleeves on many different aspects, so that was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're at the little bit now where there's a chance for you to. We're at that stage where you've got a chance to tell people how they can follow your adventures. We talked about some stuff already, but I guess I can also put links in the show notes. But if you want to kind of reel some things off, I mean, then now's the moment.
Yeah, man, please feel free to share all of my info and websites and stuff like that. So you can find me on Instagram. I am Cole Wilks Hunter. I post a lot on there, and that's linked to my Facebook page also. You probably can't get on with my Facebook anymore because they've pretty much got me capped there. But you can definitely go follow along at Cole Wilks Hunter on Instagram. And my Flatlander YouTube page is Flatlander. You can follow all of my hunts, and I'm actually going to be releasing a survival series here coming up pretty soon. I'm in the process of trying to find some time to get some of that recorded and edited and ready to put up. So Flatlander on YouTube. And then you can listen to us every Monday. Joel Vanderloon and I have a podcast with Joel. Was on season 7 of Alone. I'm sure you guys have heard him on this podcast. But we started the podcast In the Bush with Cole and Joel. And it's everywhere that you find any podcast. And then, yeah, man, I think that's pretty much the gist of it there. Oh, my website, learnhuntharvest.com. You can go there, and that is brand new. So there's not a ton of activity going on there yet, but you can go there and sign up. I do some private consultations through Zoom to where we can, wherever you're at in your hunting life, if you're just brand new to it and just getting into hunting, I basically spend time and teach people over Zoom, and I also do one-on-one in the field teaching as well. So you can go there and get in contact with me and sign up to learn to be a hunter.
Perfect. Thanks again, dude. That was epic. I've been excited about this one for a while. So
anytime, dude.
Awesome.
Anytime. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to at some point maybe get you back on. If I'm sure there's loads of other stuff we could talk about. We covered a bunch today, but
oh yeah, I'm sure if you just kind of follow along with what's going on in my life, I'm sure there's probably going to be some new stuff coming out soon that you might want to talk to me about. So yeah.
All right. Nice. Okay. Thanks, chat.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, dude. Peace, y'all.
Right. That's a wrap on another episode, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Full disclosure, Cole and I think, talked for maybe another hour after we pulled the plug, stopped recording on this episode. I probably should have just kept the recording going. But yeah, a really interesting dude. Very grateful for his time. Cole, thank you very much for sharing your stories today, sharing your time, and sharing your top tips on some skills as well. Everybody, if you are inspired by the many cool things that Cole has said in this episode, then be sure to check the show notes. I've put links to all the places that you can follow and learn from Cole, all the stuff that he mentioned just earlier. Also, we talked about it a few times, but I want to give it one last shout out, guys. If you're enjoying this podcast, then I definitely think you're going to love the In the Bush podcast with Cole and Joel. I never quite remember which way around it is, but I think it's Cole first, then Joel second. I've listened to a bunch of their episodes. I think they've got to be close to 10 episodes in now. And there's some absolute golden ones in there. Absolute gold. The one I just listened to just blew my mind. John Young, his name is, and he is a master of wilderness knowledge and understanding. He, I guess, particularly is actually an expert in bird communication. But I guess you wouldn't think that is, oh, how important is that? What should I understand? But the thing is, if you understand what the birds are saying, you know what is going on all around you. And so that was definitely a bit of a, just like the lights are turned on in my otherwise, I guess, stupid and dark mind. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Congrats on that episode, guys. If you did enjoy this episode and any of the other ones that you heard beforehand, then by all means, please make my day and leave a review. Do the things that people do when they really enjoy podcasts. You can like, you can subscribe. All those lovely things are fantastic and highly appreciated. Share with a friend. Maybe I did that. Did I say that already? Yeah. Share with a friend. Okay. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, everyone. And until next time.